Good morning, and welcome to today's hearing of the Subcommittee on Tourism, Trade, and Export Promotion. Today, we will turn our attention specifically to the important topic of exports. This morning's hearing, Enabling Rural Businesses to Grow at Home While Competing Abroad, will examine the current landscape for rural export businesses, including the challenges they face when accessing international markets and the federal resources available to rural business owners as they expand or start their export activities. You know, exports, they're vital to our nation's economic prosperity. In 2021, exports of goods and services made up over 10% of the U.S. GDP and supported about 9 million American jobs. International trade has similarly become an increasingly important part, of Nevada's economy, my home state, with the state exporting $10 billion worth of goods in 2022, along with supporting over 400,000 jobs. It's a lot of jobs in a state of 3 million people, I'll tell you that. And so in Nevada, we export everything from the gold we mine to the alfalfa we grow, to the lithium batteries for which Nevada is fast becoming a world leader. While exporting is a key driver of our national and state economies, it can also serve as a catalyst for growth for many businesses. Access to international markets enables businesses to grow faster, create more jobs, pay higher wages more than non-exporting companies. It's really important. And additionally, exporting can provide a buffer for businesses during the fluctuations in the U.S. economy, providing access to diverse revenue streams, reducing dependence on the domestic market, and enabling them to stay in business. Small businesses in particular play a critical role in our export ecosystem as they represent over 97% of all exporters nationwide, produce nearly a third of our export value, and employ almost half of the country's private sector workforce. And they also make up over 99% of all businesses in Nevada, 99.2% to be exact. Despite numerous benefits, many companies have not yet fully capitalized on the opportunities provided by exporting. Only 1% of American companies export, despite over 95% of the world's customers living outside our nation's borders. The good news is the number of small and mid-sized exporters is growing fast and has risen threefold over the last 20 years. These numbers are encouraging, especially considering the high-cost environment facing our small businesses today. However, we must ensure that businesses in our rural communities are not left behind when policymakers consider ways to expand export opportunities for small businesses. Our rural businesses are a hub for export potential, with small businesses, farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, and others exporting billions of goods every year across the agriculture, energy, and manufacturing sector. Well, there are clear benefits and growing opportunities for businesses to begin exporting. Rural businesses, they often face unique challenges when looking to start or expand their export operations. Access to capital is a primary obstacle for many rural businesses, as there are often far fewer banking institutions and financial resources available to them in rural areas compared to larger cities. Given that adequate financing for export businesses is particularly critical due to the high cost of exporting, these capital challenges are compounded for our rural export businesses. Additionally, rural businesses often lack access to the tools and resources that could, help them navigate the foreign markets, either due to insufficient broadband access or difficulty, again, finding resources that are located close to home. Due to these challenges, some rural businesses may need additional support just to get started. In recent years, agencies across the federal government have invested in resources for rural export businesses, with the Department of Commerce, the Office of United States Trade Representative, and the Department of Agriculture, and so many others providing financing options and technical assistance to help businesses, tap into those international markets. These resources include rural export centers, which provide customized research tools and analysis to help rural businesses take advantage of new investment opportunities and access new customers in markets abroad. And I'm thrilled to say that Nevada is home to the West Rural Export Center, which is empowering businesses in Nevada's rural communities to innovate and to grow through exporting. Nonetheless, we know that far more work is needed to support rural businesses to take full advantage of our global markets. Today's hearing is going to help us understand how Congress and the federal agencies, including the International Trade Administration's U.S. Commercial Service, which this subcommittee oversees, can better empower rural export businesses. That's why I'm so glad we have an excellent panel of witnesses here today to help us do just that. We're privileged to have joining us Mr. Reed Westcott, the Executive Director of the Small Business Export Association. Mr. Dillon Davidson, Vice Chair of the Nevada District Export Council, and Mr. Gary Salamito, President and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today, especially those who have traveled from out of state to participate in person. I look forward to hearing each of you share your experiences and expertise with us as we discuss ways to support our rural export businesses. And I'm going to turn it over to Ranking Member Budd for his opening statement. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Chair Rosen, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. You know, as someone who grew up and still lives in rural North Carolina, I deeply appreciate the focus of this hearing. Rural communities across our country are the primary drivers of economic growth, and we rely on these hardworking folks each and every day. It's the farmers, growers, and producers who put food on America's tables. It's the small businesses who employ millions of our workers. And it's the Main Street shops and storefronts that enrich local communities by building trust and reliability over the course of generations. Bottom line, for America to succeed, we need rural America to succeed. When it comes to government policy, my view has always been that deregulation, coupled with a competitive tax system, holds the key for economic growth. That approach empowers people and gives them the freedom to take chances, to innovate, and to live the American dream. I'm proud to say that my state of North Carolina has led the way in pursuing this agenda for years. Our state has been recognized nationally as one of the best in the country to do business in. Now, I'm sure our friend Mr. Salamito will go into more detail on this and brag on the Old North State, but I don't want to steal any of his thunder. But I'll also say that without collaboration between public officials, particularly the state legislature, which we're so proud of, and private sector job creators, North Carolina's success story would not be possible. I believe that other states would do well to copy North Carolina's policy victories so that they can achieve a similar level of success. So again, thank you to you all for being here. Thank you, Chair Rosen, and I look forward to a thoughtful conversation.
Well, thank you, Senator Budd. And I'd like to introduce our first witness today, Mr. Reed Westcott. Mr. Westcott is the Executive Director of the Small Business Exporters Association, which is the international trade arm of the National Small Business Association and the nation's oldest and largest nonprofit association representing small business exporters. In his position, Mr. Westcott is responsible for leading the development and implementation of the advocacy strategy for the SBEA and the NSBA. Mr. Westcott, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for your work on advocating for small export businesses. I recognize you now for your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Rosen, Ranking Member Budd, members of the committee, thank you for holding today's hearing on the experience of small and rural exporters, and for your ongoing commitment to pursuing policies which ensure these businesses can compete and thrive in the global marketplace. My name is Reed Westcott, and as you mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs and Federal Policy for the National Small Business Association, as well as Executive Director for the Small Business Exporters Association, which is a council of NSBA. Founded in 1937, NSBA is the oldest nonprofit association representing small businesses, including small exporters. At NSBA, we believe strongly in the role of American small and mid-sized export, or SME, businesses in the international marketplace. These companies expand the reach of American products and services to global markets, increasing their sales and revenue while supporting the economic growth of the nation. Small exporters also play a vital role in their communities. They often source materials locally, support regional supply chains, and contribute to the development of ancillary industries. By engaging in international trade, these businesses bring innovative and diverse cultural and business practices back to their communities, fostering innovation and broadening local perspectives. According to estimates from the SBA, over 1.3 million small businesses are exporters, representing 97% of all U.S. exporters. These small businesses are directly responsible for over 1/3 of all U.S. exports and believed to be indirectly responsible for even more. That amounts to $542 billion in known exports from small businesses alone. Small businesses also represent approximately 85% of all businesses in rural areas and provide more than half of all rural jobs. Small businesses are a central thread weaving the fabric of small-town American main streets from Nevada to North Carolina and from Michigan to Alabama. One example is a company called Air Tractor, which manufactures aircraft in only Texas. Air Tractor provides 400 high-quality jobs in this rural area that are largely dependent on international sales. Their former CFO put it to me recently, "I would certainly tout the advantages of exporting. The process is not fast, but it pays huge dividends." There are certainly impediments for rural small businesses to do exports, but if one is persistent and seeks help, the payoff is big. He notes that jobs have quadrupled since Air Tractor leaned into exports and that exports now make up 60% of their overall business. Importantly, this excitement over the potential benefits of exporting is not simply anecdotal, but is also borne out in the data. In 2022, NSBA conducted a survey which showed that more than half of currently non-exporting SMEs would be interested in selling goods and/or services to foreign customers if barriers to entry could be addressed. 45% of non-exporting small businesses surveyed cite a lack of information and understanding of where to begin as a primary barrier to selling goods and services internationally, making it far and away the number one obstacle. I frequently hear stories about difficulties accessing the wealth of resources EXIM and others provide. There's a valuable opportunity here for the federal government to increase its outreach to SMEs by highlighting resources available through ITA's rural export centers, possibly by utilizing existing community-based help centers such as SBDCs. Interagency partnerships are also an ideal starting point to increase the distribution of information and the uptake of resources. A great example of this is S4764, the Bipartisan Coordinated Support for Rural Small Businesses Act, introduced by Senators Shaheen and Kennedy late last week. This bill elevates the significance of the Office of Rural Affairs at SBA by creating an assistant administrator and codifying the 2023 SBA and USDA MOU that helps ensure that entrepreneurs who have a greater familiarity with one agency are able to access the resources provided by both. Especially in rural areas where the varying market penetration of different federal agencies can create information gaps, this goes a long way. Strengthening the dormant Office of Rural Affairs would give the government a robust tool to better match federal programs with rural entrepreneurs. This underutilized office has the capacity to become air traffic control for federal resources in rural areas, serving as a vital central hub for a dizzying array of programs. There are also significant hurdles in navigating complex trade regimes, which often impose a heavy administrative and financial burden. To take a first step towards tackling these issues, it is imperative that we work towards the harmonization of trade rules. SMEs lack the resources to comply with complex trade regulations, a burden borne far more easily by their large counterparts. An effective harmonization regime can significantly lower compliance costs, democratizing the export space. Looking beyond harmonization, small businesses would also greatly benefit from trade deals that establish clear rules of the road. These rules should be 1, transparent and accessible, offering clear guidelines on regulations, tariffs, and procedures. 2, consistent and predictable to help businesses plan their operations and investments. And 3, include support mechanisms such as training, resources, and assistance programs. Additionally, financing is frequently a challenge, particularly with traditional lenders who may view SMEs as higher risk ventures. Even for small companies who have secured guaranteed EXIM financing for their products, it can be a challenge to find downstream buyers for those guaranteed loans. It is vital that as Congress examines potential legislation governing financial institutions, markets, and products, lawmakers consider the impacts on small companies' ability to access the capital they need. In conclusion, while small and rural exporters face numerous challenges in entering global markets, we believe that by streamlining the distribution of information on existing federal resources, simplifying and harmonizing trade rules, and protecting access to capital, the federal government can ensure these companies thrive. On behalf of NSBA and SBEA, I'd like to reiterate the small business community's thanks to the committee for its attention to these issues, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. I'd now like to introduce our next witness, Mr. Dillon Davidson. Mr. Davidson is a senior trade officer for the Nevada Department of Agriculture, where he leads the department's domestic and international trade programs and economic data services. Mr. Davidson also serves as the vice chair of the Nevada District Export Council, which offers resources and assistance to Nevada businesses looking to start or expand their export operations. Thank you for traveling all the way from Reno, Nevada, to be here with us today. And Mr. Davidson, I recognize you now for your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairwoman Rosen, Ranking Member Budd, and members of the subcommittee. I am Dillon Davidson, and while I serve as the Vice Chair for the Nevada District Export Council and President of the North American Agricultural Marketing Officials, I am here in my capacity as Senior Trade Officer for the Nevada Department of Agriculture. From growing up on a tractor to teaching advanced American farming techniques to rural farmers in Africa while in college, to now striving daily to expand Nevada's agricultural reach into domestic and international markets. For over 5 years, I have overseen food and agricultural marketing, trade, and economic development in the state of Nevada. I am here today to share my knowledge and experience on the impacts and challenges of rural exporters. Although Nevada is most known for its tourism, gaming, and mining, Nevada's agriculture industries are important to the state's overall economic culture. Outside of Nevada's 3 urban counties, the remaining 14 counties make up approximately 87% of Nevada's land and have an average population of 2.5 people per square mile. This makes up the majority of the geographical region of Nevada rural. Agricultural land production dominates these rural areas. In the state's desert climate and topography, the production of onion, hay, and alfalfa flourish. 61% of the high-value alfalfa is exported outside of the United States. But these companies' successes do not come without hardship. In 2023, Nevada exported a total of $9.53 billion worth of goods to foreign markets, with major trade partners being Canada, Mexico, Western Europe, and South Korea. Although agriculture makes up a significant portion of Nevada's rural export economy, mining and manufacturing sectors are also significant contributors, with Nevada being a leader in the lithium loop. By opening one of 9 U.S. commercial service rural export centers in the United States in Las Vegas, Nevada has prioritized rural exporters in all areas through partnerships between key federal and state agencies, including the Governor's Office, Economic Development, Agriculture, and Business and Industry. As of December 2023, there are approximately 310,000 small businesses, making up 99.2% of all businesses in the state. These businesses employ 540,000 people, comprising 42.8% of Nevada's workforce. Of those 310,000 small businesses, there are roughly 3,100 currently exporting. In recent years, we have seen many rural producers face significant challenges outside of the general financial constraints, including lack of expertise and resources, transportation logistics, general foreign tariff and trade barriers, broadband connectivity issues, and most pressing in Nevada, the decline of rural land due to continued growth of urban populations. The combination of these obstructions is impacting the ability for rural exports to enter or expand in new and existing foreign markets. Senator Rosen's support in 2021 on pursuing the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which has passed and signed into law, is a step in the right direction to ensuring that issues like broadband, airports, and roads, which are all key components to rural producers, are maintained, repaired, and expanded as needed. Through federal and state partnerships, we can address the biggest challenges and concerns for rural Nevada exporters. Through the state's participation in trade missions and trade shows, we are promoting Nevada rural businesses and placing them in front of international stakeholders with a minimal impact to their operational costs. Just recently, Nevada represented 5 food manufacturers at the Seoul Food and Hotel Trade Show in Seoul, South Korea, and had recent delegation visits to Nevada from Vietnam and Japan, where international stakeholders had business meetings with various Nevada rural producers. Funding programs like this are what embodies the growth of American economy through the export of agricultural products to address the trade imbalance and ensure the American competitiveness in the current and future economic landscape across all sectors of rural America. Opportunities like the State Trade Expansion Program, Market Access Program, the Nevada Craft Beverage Passport, or the Women's Farm to Food Accelerator Program on both state and federal levels allow us to tackle another concern of many rural producers, which is the lack of infrastructure in these regions. The Nevada District Export Council also plays a major role in assisting all Nevada exporters, especially rural exporters, as they face continued challenges. The Nevada DEC has the capacity to facilitate the development of an effective export assistance network and can assist in coordinating the implementation of trade assistance partners to leverage the available resources necessary. When companies partner with organizations like state and federal agencies and the DEC, they are better prepared to enter new markets or expand their existing markets around the world. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'd now like to turn it over to Ranking Member Budd to introduce our last witness.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce our witness, Mr. Gary Salamito. Mr. Salamito serves as the President and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber, where he's been a steadfast advocate for business growth and economic development throughout our state. His extensive experience and deep understanding of the issues rural businesses face make him a valuable asset to today's discussion. Mr. Salamito, thank you for being here today and for your ongoing commitment to support our rural communities in their export efforts. We look forward to your testimony and to a productive discussion about how to strengthen our support for rural export businesses.
Thank you. Chair Rosen, Ranking Member Budd, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony today on behalf of the North Carolina business community. We're a manufacturing-heavy state with affordable, reliable energy, right-to-work status, and a competitive tax climate. While we see growth in our urban counties daily, we are seeing jobs announcements in the rural and suburban areas surrounding our major population centers as business looks for land required to build significant operations. North Carolina's business community and policymakers have worked hard to cement our position as a competitive state for business, nationally and globally. We take great pride in our diverse economy and our private sector job growth. Reaching this competitive position for North Carolina was intentional. The leadership of North Carolina's dynamic business community charged the NC Chamber with creating and executing a plan for North Carolina that is focused on education and talent supply, a competitive business climate, and infrastructure and growth investment. The plan's worked, but we cannot be complacent if we want to remain competitive and on top both nationally and globally. To help our rural businesses access international markets, they need an available and qualified workforce. Unfortunately, many rural areas in our state are experiencing population decline and birth rates aren't keeping up. Our members have ranked workforce availability as the #1 issue impacting business for 9 years in a row. Federal, state, and local policies that alleviate the cost of living, enable workforce participation, improve quality of life, and grow talent pools are crucial. Key issues holding our workforce back include housing, childcare, transportation, and thoughtful criminal justice reform. Forward-looking investments in rural areas that reinforce a sense of place and belonging are essential, and employment-based immigration is a necessary tool. Aligning our education systems and business needs is a critical opportunity for North Carolinians. One of the best ways to achieve this is by creating a demand-driven workforce system that is genuinely employer-led, leveraging the U.S. Chamber Talent Pipeline Management Framework. In many of our North Carolina's rural communities, agriculture plays a foundational role in the economy, in addition to the essential role that North Carolina plays in the national food security. With that in mind, the Golden Leaf Foundation and the North Carolina Chamber Foundation, in partnership with the North Carolina Farm Bureau, are championing NC Ag Leads, a strategic planning effort for North Carolina agriculture, an over $110 billion industry in North Carolina. Over the last 6 months, NC Ag Leads team traveled the state to facilitate 23 focus groups, reaching 68 counties and more than 340 members of North Carolina's agriculture industry. This discernment phase identified opportunities and threats to the talent pipeline, land competition, market access, generational concerns, and farm support systems. Today, the biggest challenge to rural business growth is adequate infrastructure. The message is echoed across North Carolina's business community, no matter the size, location, or industry of the business. Cold chain has been a focus for the North Carolina ports, and they're working to make transporting refrigerated cargo faster and more efficient than ever. These capabilities have broad-reaching significance. Given North Carolina's significant grocery sector footprint and the perishable import distribution systems that service this growing demand, NC Ports, North Carolina's ports, serves as an ideal gateway for the U.S. and East Coast locations. This saves businesses time, money, and distance in reaching consumers. It also creates an opportunity for rural small businesses to serve these critical supply chains. Many North Carolina farmers had figured out that we cannot have exports without imports. The family farms and multinationals that are producing traditional seasonal crops have been able to leverage their infrastructure to partner with other companies to bring in produce, package it, and sustain a 12-month operation that keeps workers attached. Cold chain capabilities have implications beyond food. The life sciences industry sees opportunities to increase volume by shifting from air to sea transport. This could be a key piece of expanding our pharmaceutical footprint. For our state's businesses to be competitive trading partners, we must provide them with a level playing field, which includes combating bad actors that circumvent fair trade and U.S. trade restrictions. The success of North Carolina's infrastructure and workforce systems, poised for growth, can be attributed to the strong business climate on which they are built. North Carolina's success has been made possible and will continue to grow through the commitment of our statewide business community with a clear vision, state and federal leaders willing to act on it. Thank you for your time today and for your leadership, and we look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you so much, all three of our witnesses, for their opening statements. I just want to say I also sit on the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, so that's a good intersection for this subcommittee, and the testimony and things that you're going to tell us about, the opportunities and the challenge that you've all alluded to today, really will help me improve the legislation that we can put forward for both committees. So thank you. And we're going to talk about the export barriers to entry first, because exporting can be hugely beneficial to a small business's bottom line, overall success. On average, companies that export earn higher revenues, which can be used to reinvest in their employees, create new jobs, pay higher wages. And given the important role that rural small businesses play as the economic backbone of our local communities, including in Nevada, it's critical that businesses in our rural areas are able to benefit from robust export operation. Unfortunately, only 1% of American businesses small businesses export, and this has really created missed opportunities for small businesses to generate those jobs and economic growth in communities that really would rely on them. So to all three witnesses, if you want to say what you think the biggest barriers to entry for exporting our rural small businesses are, and what federal resources exist to help overcome the challenges, or what resources do you need to help overcome the challenges, we want to be sure that our rural businesses have the tools they need to get there. So let's begin with Mr. Davidson, and then we'll go to Mr. Salamito, and then to Mr. Westcott. Mr. Davidson, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman. For Nevada rural producers, the biggest barrier to entry of export is the regulatory uncertainty. Many rural producers don't have the understanding or the knowledge of complying with the complex export regulations, navigating export controls, and custom procedures for country-specific requirements. Things that are currently in place that can assist these exporters is using the STEP grant funds or the market access program funds that can allow them to get that export education. So utilizing the state and federal agencies are key to make sure that they're getting that knowledge and that expertise so that when they're ready to enter the export market, they're ready.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Salamito.
Yeah, echo what Mr. Davidson said. And in addition, it's really about three things. First, about talent. It's about making sure that the talent in our rural areas is aligned with the needs and the businesses that are there. And so programs that support that, like the Employer Directed Skills Act, the Pell Act, thank you, Senator Budd, for that. The Chamber fully supports those initiatives and what they do for North Carolinians, and particularly North Carolinians and small business. So talent is at the forefront. And the other barrier is infrastructure, that roads, rails, ports, water, sewer, all the things that are necessary to do a couple of things. One is to make sure we can get raw materials in and products to market. That particularly favors our small businesses that are, 3, 4, 5 indirect job multipliers to our larger businesses in our non-urban areas. So that infrastructure, the certainty of making sure that they can get to markets. And third, a good resource is making sure that there are export services and teaching opportunities available to small rural businesses. In North Carolina, our Small Business Technology Development Center there, which is our arm of the Small Business Administration, has incredible programs that are available to small businesses that demystify and help them understand and manage those issues. And access to capital also exists through SBTDC. We did a partnership with SBTDC, the North Carolina Bankers Association, the Rural Center. It's called Capital Opportunities, and it allows small businesses to go onto a website, onto an app, plug in their information, and align them with banks and financial institutions willing to assist them. So it's about talent, it's about infrastructure, access to capital, and removing some of the barriers that Mr. Davidson discussed.
Thank you. Mr. Westcott.
Yeah, couldn't echo that strongly enough. Pretty much everything that's been mentioned so far comes up. So in 2022, NSBA, as I mentioned in my testimony, did a survey, and one of the main questions we asked for folks who are not currently exporting is, what are the barriers that you're seeing? What's preventing you from doing this? The number one thing was education, awareness. I don't know enough. I need to know more about how this process works. But regulation, all these other things have been mentioned throughout the course of this. So I think the number one thing that we see is really just understanding of and awareness of the benefits of exporting. And we think that the simplest way to address this would be to really centralize resources, as I mentioned earlier, creating some creating a position within SBA, because that's generally the de facto resource for most small businesses, and especially rural small businesses, that can really elucidate for folks the full roster of resources available to them. We think that's probably the single largest barrier to folks participating, is just being able to overcome that information gap.
So maybe a one-stop shop dashboard, and I would add broadband to that infrastructure need there. I'm going to ask one more question before I turn it over to Senator Budd, because it's so important that we do have these rural export centers. And across the country, our rural export centers provide invaluable services to small rural businesses interested. Like you said, they've got to grow their operations. It really matters, and it's fantastic. And so, but due to their location, rural businesses have historically faced barriers accessing the counseling and guidance, just like you've spoken about, to reach international markets. Rural export centers successfully do bridge this gap by meeting rural businesses where they are, and we're proud to have the West Rural Export Center in Nevada, and it has empowered rural businesses in Nevada to leverage those federal resources and take full advantage of the benefits of exporting. So, Mr. Davidson, can you talk a little bit about the importance of having the federal resources, our rural exports, our West Export Center, specifically dedicated to the rural export business, and how do you really address the unique needs?
Every exporter and every small business has their own needs and expertise, and having the ability to have the Rural Export Center in Las Vegas is a crucial component and resource for our Nevada small businesses, especially in the rural areas of Nevada. It's really important to make sure that we're getting there in front of them, like you mentioned, coming to them and showing them the steps of how to get to those federal resources. I think exports are a scary word to a lot of small businesses. They think that they have to be this big multi-billion-dollar company in order to export, and that's not true. A lot of Nevada small businesses that only export a small percentage, but they are considered an exporter. So really showing them that they can make that significant change and getting them in front of the resources necessary through partnerships through a state and federal level. So we have the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the Small Business Development Center in connection with the U.S. Commerce. All of us together can work to support all rural exporters in Nevada.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Budd for your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And, perhaps this is a holdover from my time in the House on financial services, but you mentioned a bank matching tool, I believe, was one of the features. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, it's called Capital Opportunities, and it's a program that the NC Chamber, the North Carolina Bankers Association, North Carolina Rural Center came together with the Small Business Technology Development Center, and it's an app. What we were able to do is work together through our common memberships and common interests to get banks to put on their lending requirements and access to those dollars online. A small business, a rural area business, small business from anywhere can go on and plug in what they're looking for and what their needs are, and they'll be connected with an institution that is most likely to be able to help coach them through it, help them become bankable, and also give them access to capital. So it's been there for almost a year now. It's not as well known as we would like it to be. We've tried to push it out in numerous ways. So it's a great vehicle to get access to capital for small and rural businesses.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying on that. Can you talk a little bit about how successful rural exporters have positively impacted communities in North Carolina? I know it's sort of an outsized effect of small businesses in North Carolina, but if you would talk about their impact on small communities.
Yeah, it's significant because you need a whole lot of small businesses to support getting products to and from market. So there's all different types of small businesses that do. There's trucking companies that do that. There's companies that produce and distribute the boxes that things need to go into. The whole food processing piece. I think one of the most interesting pieces recently has been the evolution and the investment in cold chain supply support in North Carolina. It allows our farmers and our smaller businesses to get products to export, and they're fresher because we have cold storage lined up. The interesting part, too, is other countries, particularly countries around the equator, have figured out how to make sure that when we're not in season, they're growing stuff in season, and that import is coming in. And that's helping our small businesses package that information. Well, the cold chain comes in and it allows them to be fresher and get to markets quicker. So there are more small businesses that are packaging, processing, holding on to their workers and throughout the year, which allows them to be more productive when the North Carolina season is in place. So a lot of connectivity there, and a lot of economic development comes when you have the tax base of those small businesses in those communities that allow the infrastructure investment to take place in our water and in our sewer and in our broadband with it. So the connectivity of being able to have imports and exports and what that generates and allows our farmers to, particularly our farmers, but everybody that supports them, to have seat around a year opportunities to continue to connect workers allows them to grow. So that cold chain, we haven't even seen fully what that impact that's going to have, but that cold chain capability, the only cold chain between Philadelphia and Miami in the middle of the country, our NC Port's investment in that is very strategic. It's going to help a lot of people.
Really look forward to that. So what, you talked a little bit about in your opening statement, my opening statement about some of the uniquenesses of North Carolina, hoping that some other state legislatures could replicate that. But if you would talk about some of the things we've done uniquely and some of the things that perhaps other states could do.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was 14 years of hard and disciplined and focused work to get North Carolina to be #1 2 years in a row and to only miss to Virginia by a couple points this last session. And we kind of look at it as
rigged.
Well, we don't look at it as we lost. We look at it as Virginia caught up for us. And I think what we did is we took a really good hard look in the mirror a good number of years ago and said, where are things working for North Carolina and where are they not? And 3 pillars were developed upon which to build policies to get us competitive. The first is education and talent supply, making sure that our education and workforce systems, K-12, community colleges, public and private universities, are aligning not only with what business needs in their workers today, but what they need for tomorrow. And how are we making sure adult learners can access those systems, because the rate and pace of innovation today is incredible, and people are going to have to change quite frequently. Then we looked at our business climate, tax, tort, civil liability reform, regulatory reform, and said, where do we get balanced and fair regulations that are predictable, and that'll allow businesses the predictability need to invest. And the last is infrastructure and growth, which we've talked about, and making those strategic investments, not only when people are in your state, but before they're coming, in order to facilitate the movement of goods and services and people. And you have to do it all together. And it takes a plan, and it takes people of like mind, the business community and business-minded public servants and those in public service and our politicians to say, we're going to make a difference. So North Carolina worked really hard starting about 14 years ago, and now we just have to stay there, because the hardest thing is to stay on top is when you're on top.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. I'd like to recognize you for your questions, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman, and thank you to you all for being here today. Tennesseans are very active in the export marketplace. We've got 6,000 companies that were exporters last year. This is a good thing for us. We know that 82% of these companies were small businesses. Now, most people think of electronic products, cars, transportation sector equipment, those things as coming from Tennessee. But there's also an area of interest that we have, and Senator Hickenlooper and I have the American Music Tourism Act. And this is about exporting our culture and encouraging both domestic and international travel to our historic music sites. So, Mr. Salamito, I'd love for you to talk a little bit. You were just talking about farm products and some other things, which of course that is important to us in Tennessee. But let's talk just a touch about the importance of promoting and exporting some of our cultural treasures, like our music.
Well, thank you, Senator. It all comes together in terms of a package that makes your state, our states, the best place to live, work, and raise your family. So being able to make sure that we have the balance and the support and the prioritization of of our music and our culture is critically important as we look to develop our young people, as we look to make sure that the businesses that are locating through all our state have the ability to access all those different cultural opportunities for the growth of their children and for the development of their own interests. And it's a critical part of it. It goes together, right? It's kind of like a Venn diagram. Yeah.
I think it does go together. Mr. Westcott, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about logistics and some of the work that is being there. Tennessee, as you know, is really America's distribution center when you talk about Memphis. And you have all 5 Class A railroads that are there. You have FedEx that is there. You've got the river. And so what are you doing to put the focus to secure supply chains, to have efficient logistics systems in place, especially when you're talking about small and rural areas?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that a little bit. So I think we all understand that our supply chains, especially after the pandemic, are significantly more fragile than we initially imagined that they were. We try to work frequently with our folks to kind of get a real understanding of what the barriers that they're facing are to making sure that their supply chains are sustainable. There's no silver bullet, as much as we wish there was. Every industry is unique, has a different series of suppliers, different macro and microeconomic concerns that they're worried about. But we are looking very, very actively at what our membership is telling us, and trying to bring that to the Hill and talk to folks about what solutions there might be to make sure that supply chains are more secure going forward than they were pre and during the pandemic.
And let me ask you this, with the ITA, what are you doing with small business exporters in the ITA to increase opportunities for some of these small and mid-sized businesses? We've got a company in Tennessee, Ace Pump Company, which is a smaller business, and they recently won their second ITA E-Star award. And so what is being done there to coordinate and open some of these doors of opportunity?
Yeah, thank you. So what we try to do is, obviously as an association, we have a limited ability to specifically act in those spaces, but we do try to push our members as much as possible to take advantage of the programs that ITA and the Rural Export Center specifically provide, whether it's RAISE, whether it's EMC, whether it's the WGR that they do. There's a lot of phenomenal resources there for folks to take advantage of, and so we try as often as possible to kind of educate our folks about what resources are available to them and see how they can get more involved in the process and work more closely with the folks at the RECs from ITA.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Well, we'll give you a second. Senator Hickenlooper's here, and as soon as he's ready to go, we'll recognize Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for coming and for your service, for all your work. This is obviously a key issue. Mr. Salamito, you mentioned that in North Carolina, a key theme concerning small businesses and including the agricultural sector is the talent pipeline. We're seeing across the board a need for skilled workers, particularly in repair shops, labs, mechanical roles, as you highlight. While technology, as you say, is being leveraged to address the problem, the reality is even more people are needed to work on the development, deployment, and maintenance of technology in agriculture. So, Mr. Salamito, how might work-based learning programs or apprenticeships address this need in small businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. It's critical. The rate and pace of innovation is like nothing we've ever seen before. And, I was going to have 1 or 2 careers, but my children and grandchildren may have 4 or 5 before it's over because of the rate and pace of innovation. So work-based learning, critically important. Apprenticeships in our high schools, getting into our middle schools earlier with programs that set up career planning for them and show them the opportunities that are available to them, making sure that our high schools support apprenticeship programs in a variety of different fields, critically important to that. And creating a culture of adult learning in our young people and in our workforce today. So supporting our businesses that are investing in those folks. They're investing in them. They want to invest in them. It also helps them to be working while they're doing that. And businesses support the advanced education for those young people. So I think it's critically important. Four-year degrees are important, but there's also opportunities, really good opportunities for people without four-year degrees that can help work their way to a four-year degree.
And certainly creating that flexibility so you can start out not intending to have a four-year degree, but then once you get into the field, if you decide to make that switch, there's no reason why you can't continue on and get a degree. Mr. Davidson, in your testimony, you highlight that a lack of expertise and knowledge of logistics this is a significant barrier for small businesses looking to sell products internationally. You also point out that the lack of infrastructure, many different types of infrastructure in rural areas, whether you're talking about the modern shipping corridors or high-speed internet, this is a barrier for small companies as they seek to expand or transport goods, compete with larger companies in many cases. What types of infrastructure do you believe are the most essential in terms of supporting small businesses to grow their businesses?
Thank you, Senator. I think there's two big ones in Nevada that really impact our rural producers, and that's going to be broadband connectivity. 82% of rural Nevadans have access to broadband, but there's still a significant portion that don't. And the 82% that might have access to it might not have good access to it. So it's really important that they have that ability to be connected. Governor Lombardo has outlined a focus on connectivity in Nevada, and we want to make sure that every producer, rural or urban, has access to it. Even as a state agency, we have an ELCO office, and we experience the repercussions of lack of broadband connectivity. And funds like what the Infrastructure Act is allowing us to provide funds to those rural areas to get them connected, to be part of the rest of the exporting community. Second would be transportation. Nevada has access to three major ports: Oakland, Long Beach, and LA. And a lot of northern Nevada's producers and exporters go to the port of Oakland, and that requires getting over the I-80 pass. And winter times there is not an easy task to do. So making sure that all producers and all exporters have that ability to be able to get to the ports or rails or however else they intend to export.
Thank you. I agree with that completely. Mr. Westcott, for small businesses, securing the necessary financing to support export activities is often given as a challenge. Something that's an obstacle that's got to be overcome, especially true for small and medium-sized businesses that can't front a lot of those costs themselves. Transportation costs, overseas logistics, distribution networks and such, also involve upfront costs for a business initiating a supply chain. We introduced Investing in All of America Act to try and increase available capital to small businesses in the SBIC program, the Small Business Investment Company program, to include rural inflation adjustments. Can you comment on how domestic inflation affected many aspects of small businesses' access to capital and impeding their joining the global market?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the question. So inflationary pressures and other financial obstacles they disproportionately harm small businesses. I think it's pretty obvious for folks to see that. The access to capital that small businesses have is highly dependent on broader market fluctuations. Often the most vulnerable products in a bank's portfolio to be changed, to be altered, are these small business products, which makes it significantly more difficult for small businesses businesses to obtain financing. I've spoken specifically with some of my members, and one common practice with a lot of the guaranteed EXIM loans that folks get for their products when they sell internationally is to then sell that loan down on the secondary market to another financial institution, like you would any commoditized financial product. And they have found that because of inflationary pressures, broader market conditions, what have you, financial institutions with which they've had 20, 30-year working relationships are much less willing to buy that paper down the road. Right. So they're facing it on a couple different sides there. Got it.
Appreciate that. Madam Chair, if I could just to leave one. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to hand it back, Chairman, to Senator Hickenlooper. I'm at the Secret Service hearing, and I think I'm up next. So I'll put my questions on the record, and thank you very much to our witnesses. I care a lot about this because in Minnesota, we are fourth in the country for ag exports. We just do a lot of rural exports, and this is a great topic, and I thank our witnesses. Thank you.
I get a second chance. Now I'm just in the way of Senator Welch. Just a yes or no quick. Colorado passed a Right to Repair Act. This is really a little bit off the topic, but I think it's relevant from each of your expertise. Do you see that as something that's important to let these small rural businesses be able to operate and repair the things that often they purchase from large corporations?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, Senator.
We do not. We think that the innovation needs to exist and allow the companies to work together because some of the information is proprietary. So we think a balanced approach is possible, but we don't support a flat-out right to repair.
That's good. Now I know who I have to come talk to. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, as well. And we will go now to Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, we're having the incredible opportunity of the export is great, especially rural areas. But in Vermont, last 10 years, we've gone from $4 billion in exports to $2 billion. So I want to talk a little bit about how to address that. Some of that is a strong dollar, I know, but others are just practical implementation questions. But before I get to that, the EXIM Bank has done something terrific for Vermont, a $169 million loan to Beta Technologies, which is producing or beginning to manufacture electric planes. And that is an extraordinary benefit to get us to net zero and also huge jobs that are being created. So the initiatives, Mr. Westcott, like Make More in America, really have an impact for us in rural businesses and about 400 jobs in the state of Vermont at Beta. What should Congress do to continue to promote initiatives that help those small rural businesses compete at a global scale?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. I think continuing to invest in opportunities to support communities like that is crucial. Whenever Congress has an opportunity to expand the number of opportunities available to small businesses, I think they should certainly be looking to take that. Regardless of kind of what sector you're looking in or what piece of legislation you have in front of you, I think there's generally ways to expand opportunities for small business and specifically to increase jobs in the export space.
Well, you know, there's a number of programs that are just tough on a practical level if you're a small business to figure out how to get access to it, even with the best of efforts and outreach. I mean, some of those programs include at the International Trade Commission, SBA's State Trade Expansion Program, the Small Business Development Centers, and opportunities through XM that we talked about. But there's real challenges. You're a small business in Randolph, Vermont. You're a small business in Bennington. What I'm wondering about, is there anything that Congress can do or anything probably on a more practical level that the administration can do to increase awareness of what those current programs are and make them in a practical, real-world way accessible to some of these small businesses that would significantly benefit if it could be an easy process to get access to that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So there are a dizzying array, as I mentioned in my testimony, of federal programs available to small business owners across the country. And
And
many
I'm
of them
not
are
talking
housed.
about, that's the emphasis on dizzying.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
So,
Many of them are housed at agencies that small business owners would least expect. So USDA has, I believe it's over 50 financial assistance programs for rural applications, and a number of those, 19 that I have in front of me here, are for rural businesses specifically. And I think a lot of small business owners wouldn't go to USDA as kind of their first resource for this. So as I mentioned in my testimony, if the Office of Rural Affairs at SBA could be empowered to become a central access point for information, if they could really take on, so I know that the Rural Partners Network is out there. That's something that the administration has done.
to implement what you just said, that
Yeah.
sounded like a very practical
Yeah.
suggestion. What do we need to do?
We need to make sure that that office is empowered. So in S 4764, that bill specifically calls for the creation of an assistant administrator for that specific office, which has been dormant for a while. I think revitalizing that office and just giving it the mandate to pull.
Hold on, let's go. How do you empower them? That's like making decisions, right? So they can act. What you just said is giving them another administrator, which may be a good idea, but that is not about empowering it. What do you mean by empower?
I think I mean empower in terms of just to give them the base ability, because right now the office has been dormant. So it was originally authorized in, I think, 1990 and has been largely dormant since. And so by empower, I truly just mean give this extant office that does not have a current mandate the ability to go and pull that together. Give them maybe a congressional mandate to pull that information together and act as an operations center.
Okay, and how would you see that rolling out?
I think I want to leave the specific implementation to the true professionals here. I think I have a limited ability to see exactly how they would operationalize that inside SBA. But I think the rollout of that would be something along the lines of SBA could work with SBDCs and the other community partners they have to advertise the resources that are available. They could mention to folks as they come in that this is a new program that they could take advantage of, where they could come and talk to specific points of contact at the Office of Rural Affairs who would have access to all of the information they need to start a business. I think starting a central web portfolio is great because so many rural small businesses can access government resources better through online portals than they can through
And it's got to be made really simple,
Yeah.
right? And what about just giving information about what markets may be available to some of our rural enterprises?
Oh, well, and that's fantastic. So there is a little bit of work already going on in that space. So RAISE, the Rural America's Intelligence Service for Exports Research, that's a part of what the Rural Export Centers and ITA is providing. And I think more people would take advantage of that, more small exporters specifically, if we could just point them in that direction. So I think there are a lot of existing resources like that provide a lot of the services that I think we would want folks to have access to. It's more about just making sure they know where they live.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I'm going to kind of continue on this topic because we all need to do more online. And as a person who used to write application software, now known as apps, I think using some of the dashboard and apps that you've all talked about are really important. And I was pleased to say that my middle mile broadband deployment bill became the base bill for the infrastructure bill that is getting rural broadband out there. We're getting it out to everywhere because no one can function anymore without it, as everybody has stated. And this is going to help us expand broadband in every community in this country, and particularly in our deep frontier rural communities in Nevada, very important. And so I'm going to talk about emerging export industries. And when we think about rural export industries, of course, agriculture comes to mind, thinking about the cold chain storage. Of course, as hot as it's been this summer, a cold chain, that doesn't sound too bad. But the United States is a leading exporter of agricultural products, exporting goods from grains to livestock across the globe. And as Mr. Davidson knows, in Nevada, we export alfalfa all over the world every year. Advanced manufacturing and clean energy also provide critical export opportunities for rural Nevada and rural America. Manufacturing is a key economic contributor for our rural communities, often supporting more jobs, higher earnings in rural areas than in urban areas. And so with surging investment in clean energy technologies, supporting clean energy-related advanced manufacturing in rural areas can provide export opportunities to both current and potential exporters. As the only state that is home to lithium mine deposits, Nevada has become a hub for electric vehicle and battery manufacturing. And that's why earlier this year I was proud to help secure a federal tech hub designation and funding for the University of Nevada's Lithium Loop project, which will create an even more robust, more economic opportunities for us up in northern Nevada. So I'm going to ask you first, Mr. Davidson, can you speak to the importance of directing federal investment to emerging industries like clean energy, but it could be others, and the ways that small exporters can benefit from that? And then I'm going to ask Mr. Westcott and Mr. Salamino any comments to add to that as we build into some of these new emerging technologies, what you might have for that as well. But we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Investing our federal investment to clean energy, into other technologies. As a dry state, as a hot state, we're always looking for the latest water conservation technology that we can use for traditional agriculture. Nevada stands ready to be the leader for the full lithium loop in the United States, and we're really excited for that. And also solar. With the sun, I think we can be a leading state in terms of the solar energy. So I think moving all of these federal investments to other opportunities like this are key, especially for Nevada rural exporters and producers.
We have more solar jobs per capita than any other state in the nation, so we're on our way there. So, Mr. Westcott, can you talk about emerging technologies and what you think some of these investments we're making will help our small businesses in rural communities?
Happy to. So small businesses are among the most innovative in the country. We really we have a fantastic economy that allows these entrepreneurs to really roll their sleeves up and get involved in emerging technologies from the ground level. So anything we can do to support that is fantastic. I think one of the things, going back to what we were talking about before, with online resources, that is one of the greatest things that we can do to support small businesses in these high innovative spaces, is just to make sure that they have access to the resources that they need. So it's any issues that they have are kind of exacerbated by a lack of access to resources. So that digital divide that you were mentioning before is really crucial for us to overcome in that space. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Salamino.
Thank you, Senator. North Carolina enjoys right now reliable, affordable energy, and an all-of-the-above energy strategy is one of the things that makes it work. And I think as we look to expand into other technologies, more and more energy will be required. So looking at advanced nuclear energy and facilitating the development of clean, advanced nuclear energy will help our manufacturers and help our businesses and help those small businesses that are multiplier effect of those. It'll create more energy. It'll be cleaner energy, and it'll also free up energy that's currently on the grid for our smaller businesses and keep it affordable for our consumers. So an all-of-the-above energy strategy that takes the clean energies and takes the energies we have to transition to our clean energies makes a whole lot of sense, and keeping everything on the table will keep it affordable and reliable, and that's key for small businesses that are innovating.
Yeah, I would add water smart technology to that too, as we think about places that have too much and places that don't have enough. Senator Budd.
Thank the chair. Just to carry on, continue on with something you were speaking about with Senator Hickenlooper a few minutes ago. You mentioned workforce availability being a very critical issue, not just for North Carolina, I imagine the other states and territories as well. So I've been actively working on this issue and have introduced several pieces of legislation to deal with this. One is, and I think you mentioned this in your opening comments, the Pell Act, but also the Employer-Directed Skills Act. Could you talk, Mr. Salamino, about how these bills could specifically help solve the workforce shortage, particularly in rural areas?
Thank you, Senator. And again, thank you for both of those bills. It's about workforce, workforce, and workforce. So they ask us the top three issues are talent, talent, and talent. And by looking to make available resources, particularly to our adult learners, but to all of our learners, our veterans, for example, 20,000 veterans get discharged from North Carolina bases every year. So making resources available to them to get the skills they need to stay in North Carolina or wherever they're going to are critically important for that. The transparency in those bills is critically important to helping make it simpler for those folks that want to get reeducated, retrained for the jobs of today and tomorrow, are critically important. Also for thoughtful, in the area of criminal justice reform, thoughtful criminal justice reform, there's a whole bunch of folks out there that are nonviolent folks that have got caught into the system. So getting thoughtful criminal justice reform combined with workforce systems and the support for those systems that the two pieces of legislation that you've put forward provide are incredibly important. We have more jobs than we do people, and our birth rates are down. So we have to look at our existing communities and what people are there, and then make sure that they can get trained and retrained to have long, viable careers until our birth rate catches up one day again. But it's just we have so much opportunity, and it's just not enough people to fill them. So with the people that we have, the programs that you put forward, the bills you put forward, combined with the workforce initiatives that Senator Hickenlooper talked about, are critically important, not only for the people that are in our state, but for the way we attract talent to our state to help stay competitive.
If I may continue on, you mentioned something of 14 years ago, a market shift in our state around 2010. And I was able to thank Senator Tillis when he was in the state legislature, and he was the Speaker of the House then, and some other leaders had come to Washington last night, and they were in the room, and he had done a good job of passing the baton before he came here to Washington. But if you would talk a little bit about that shift where we became business and opportunity friendly, and now we can see the results multiple years in a row being the best place in the nation to do business, and now we're competing with Virginia, it seems. But if you could talk about that shift and sort of talk about where those ideas come from and how it's not government solving, but it's government working in collaboration with great private industry leaders. How do we take good ideas, bring them to the surface, and carry on? I'm sure in other states they've got great ideas as well, but how do we allow those to surface and not extinguish these good ideas so that we can continue to innovate and grow in different states?
Thank you, Senator. The first step is to hold up a mirror to yourself and have the courage to know what you're not good at, and to look at the economy and to look at ask the hard questions early on. So that's what we did. What the business community came together with business-minded public officials and said, okay, what are we not good at? And got really courageous and thoughtful about that. And then we put them into buckets that I talked about earlier: education and talent, competitive business climate, and infrastructure. And then made the conscious decision that we have to do them all. Right? And how do we do them? Well, let's take bites out of it. Let's take 1 year bites out of each of those things, because we know where we want to be. Back then, they were saying 3 million people were going to come to North Carolina by 2030. We surpassed that about 5 years ago, right? And they're continuing to come for our quality of life. They're continuing to come for a good job and a good place to raise their family. So you have to look in the mirror. You have to make the hard decisions. You have to realize you have to do it year after year and never be complacent. And that's why North Carolina has been so good. It was really courageous back in 2010, 2012, because a lot of folks were indicating that that's too much too fast, but we didn't. We did it at a good and a balanced pace, whether it was tax reform, whether it was regulatory reform, or whether it was infrastructure investment and diversifying how we pay for things. So it takes courage up front and then just a steady 1 year plan to execute on that. And then the best time to change your game is when you're on top of your game. Continue to make those hard investments in our education systems now, in our infrastructure systems, and protect the paper on the good policies that we've passed.
I know you talk with a lot of your other colleagues around the country. What is something that discourages the surfacing these good ideas and leadership? I'm sure you see it done poorly, but without naming names, or who's done it wrong and what discourages growth?
A lack of predictability and not having businesses, as you know, being a business owner, you just want a steady, predictable, you want to know what the rules are. And you want a judicial system and a legal system that calls balls and strikes. So not having that predictability keeps investment on the sideline, because you want to know if you're going to put your investment in, not only what it's worth today, but is it worth tomorrow? Am I going to be able to generate more jobs tomorrow because I'm certain of what I'm going to be facing? So I think when you look around, wherever there's uncertainty, wherever there's volatility, wherever there's lack of predictability in a legal climate, unbalanced regulations that go too far in either direction. I think those are the things that businesses say, hold on, let me wait a little bit and see before I invest. So to the extent that our state and other states can balance that out, have a clear plan, that helps businesses invest.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Senator Klobuchar. She's remote. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. I've returned and appreciate letting me say that minute. But I got my questions done in a very important hearing here. And this really matters to, as I noted, our state a lot. And I just don't think there's enough emphasis on rural export when over 95% of the world's consumers live outside the U.S., and there's literally a world of opportunity. So I really appreciate the chair and the ranking members focused. One of the things that U.S. exporters in my state have were very concerned about, continue to be concerned, is just the cost of shipping. And that's why Senator Thune and I teamed up several years ago to pass that bipartisan shipping reform bill that the president signed into law. And that was a major effort out of the Commerce Committee. And the rates went down for quite a while. And they're still not where they were at the peak of the pandemic, which is good and affects manufacturers and farmers. There's still some issues that I've been hearing about the effect of terrorism and other things on shipping rates. But Mr. Davidson, can you talk to the importance of having a reliable, resilient supply chain when it comes to exporting?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, supply chain is a huge factor, especially for agriculture and food production. With Nevada exports primarily utilizing the 3 key ports of Oakland, LA, and Long Beach, the likelihood of exports being taken advantage of at the port is likely. But thanks to the bill that you and your colleagues passed, has helped protect those producers from being declined at the port. Although that part is taken care of, we do see some struggles with our southern border and getting our fresh onions into the Mexico markets. They passed all of the USDA and US regulations, and then when they get into the market, they get denied and then sent back, and then that producer is no longer allowed to import into the Mexican market. So I think there's still work to be done on getting exports out there. I think the Ocean Shipping Reform Act is one step, but to continue those efforts.
Very good. Mr. Salamito, Brand USA, as Senator Rosen is well aware with her work on tourism and her leadership, is a public-private partnership that promotes international tourism in the U.S., doesn't use taxpayer dollars, uses fees on visas on visitors from foreign countries. It's generated $56 billion to our economy, this foreign travel since 2013, supports about 40,000 jobs each year. Senator Blunt and Moran and I have worked on this for years, Blunt when he was here. Talk about how the Congress can support tourism in rural areas. Again, this is one of those exports that's a little bit, you don't think of it as an export because it's not like a sugar beet, but could you talk about how you can actually make money off of tourism in rural?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your work on Brand USA, because tourism is a critical component of North Carolina's economy, from the mountains to the coast. For us, it's a total direct spending, about $35 billion a year. We employ over 227,000 folks in the tourism industry throughout there. And those areas are in non-urban and rural areas, so it's critically important. We appreciate the work you've done on Brand USA. We have a public-private partnership in North Carolina for economic development also, who a key arm of that is tourism and making sure that those jobs that are in rural areas that allow people to explore mountains and rivers and our coast and everything in between. So critically important to what we do. Our visitor spending per day is almost $100 million in North Carolina for tourism-related activities. So that's a lot of small businesses, a lot of rural business who can feed their families and invest in their communities because of the importance of tourism to our rural community.
Okay. Mr. Westcott, the Rural Export Center in Fargo, North Dakota, which also helps that part nearby of my state, provides data analytics and resources to support small businesses in rural areas. Senator Hoeven and I have long led the Promoting Rural Export Act to authorize this center permanently. Can you talk about the role that data analytics plays in supporting small businesses? So it's basically so they know where to go with their product when they don't have an entire arm of a small business of 20 people maybe devoted to exporting in Kazakhstan or other places, like some of our big businesses have trade experts in regions of the country that small businesses just wouldn't be able to have the funding to hire.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The big thing is these centers and the resources and the research that they provide are allowing small companies to compete on the global stage in areas where they wouldn't be able to otherwise. It provides them with insights, tools, and data that was previously reserved only for the biggest corporations who were able to operate in multiple markets all over the world and finance folks in the most far-flung of destinations. So these centers are crucial. They provide folks with much needed data to understand the size of the potential market they're working with, who their potential partners might be, give them just generally a 30,000-foot look into the potential market they're exploring internationally. So they're fantastic, and we're very, very happy to see them continue to support small businesses.
Thank you. And I'll do my last question on the record because everyone's been so patient. But it is about the importance of the Farm Bill passing, Mr. Davidson, and the ag export piece of this with both the market access program and the regional agricultural promotion program, which play a key role in rural as well as some of the other things we've talked about today. So hopefully we can get that Farm Bill done this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you, Senator
Klobuchar.
Rosen.
Appreciate it. I have one final question, and so does Senator Budd. So I want to talk, just make a comment about workforce, and I'm just going to ask everybody yes or no, because we need workforce and we need capital, right? They have to exist together. So does everyone here support expanding apprenticeships, internships, and incentives? Would that be a good thing to help our rural businesses? You can just...
Emphatic yes.
Emphatic yes. Mr. Davidson.
Absolutely, Senator.
Mr. Westcott.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I know many of us have bills. I have a bill, you talked about adult education, works for returnships, people who have stepped away from the workforce, maybe for child care or elder care or other kinds of issues in their life, so they want to upskill or reskill. And so these are really important. But I'm going to move on to the second piece of this, which is access to capital, because you need people and the finances to do things, right? So small businesses, we know they often cite a lack of access to capital and obstacles, one of the main obstacles they have reaching their foreign markets. And so it's really vital. And exporting activity can actually just be more costly than domestic business due to its complicated, regulatory hurdles and logistics, as you've all alluded to. And so despite its importance to their operation, rural export businesses face significant barriers accessing capital, with many relying on a dwindling number of small banks, local banks for financing. You've spoken about this too, Mr. Westcott. I'm going to ask each of you a little bit different question. Mr. Westcott, what specific characteristics of export businesses make finding financing particularly difficult? And how can we exacerbate these challenges in rural communities? And then I'll have a separate question for each of you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Appreciate that. So the number one thing that I heard in talking to my members about this exact issue was they've noted that a lot of banks have an issue with the specific sizes of loans that they're looking for. So given economic headwinds, inflationary pressures, other financial uncertainty, banks, in some of my members' experience, tend to prefer giving a single larger loan to a larger business or a larger operation that has that guarantee tied to it, as opposed to the corresponding 10, 15, 20 smaller loans that would kind of feed into that. So I think it's really a size issue as well, as much as anything else.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Davidson, how can Congress expand and strengthen existing federal export finance program to better reach rural businesses? And if you could talk to us about the structural barriers or the requirements that make these programs difficult for our small businesses to access. Maybe they want large loans, not the micro loans, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. I think just being able to expand on the existing programs that we have and really looking at the federal export finance programs and the SBA lending programs, I mean, especially in the food and ag sector, it requires a lot of loans. We actually have a 24-year-old farmer in Fallon, Nevada, who is currently $2 million in debt because he needs to purchase land and equipment to be able to have a livable production facility. It's not sustainable for younger producers or, frankly, anybody. So by looking at these lending programs and the financial constraints to be able to kind of relieve some of these, maybe it's a lower interest rate on some of the loans, or more access to be able to get into these loans. Because where's a 24-year-old going to find $2 million to be able to build their business?
And we have a lot of wonderful young folks in Nevada that do want to do these things. And so, Mr. Salamito, I'm going to finish my last bit of question with you about the private sector. What private sector financing options are available to the small rural export businesses, and how might we partner better?
Yeah, a real hidden gem that we all need to do a better job of getting the information out are our small business administration groups, units within our states. Our SBTDC has about 7,000 clients right now, and that's money that the federal government has put forward and North Carolina government has put forward to give small businesses of all sizes and shapes understanding on how to get into the export market, how to access capital, and it's there at no cost to the small business. It's been paid for with their tax dollars already, and the SBTD sits there and brings people in and helps them become bankable. Right. And that's why we created the Capital Opportunities app. Let's use the small business experience, and let's create an access to the capital. The capital is there. We have to help help small businesses understand how to get bankable, and that there are resources there available to them on our 17 campuses of our university system. They're all right there.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to you, Senator Budd.
Thank you. Mr. Salamito, banking deregulation has been huge for North Carolina over recent decades. But kind of using that as an example, are there other areas, specifically if policy was, or if there was deregulation, or if there was regulation reform or outright removal, is there any area specifically that would help North Carolina's economy, and it would specifically help rural economies if there was deregulation reform or outright removal of regulatory constraints?
Yeah, I think there's two specific areas related to workforce where regulatory reform, modernization, and elimination really would be helpful. One is in childcare. In childcare right now, if two people are working, it's really difficult to get childcare that facilitates work, right? Because they have to it's very expensive. So there are ways to modernize and look at our childcare regulations, keep our children safe by all measures, right? But let's look at how we use innovation, how we use our young people, how we use our education, what are educational requirements for childcare workers, making sure they're aligned with today's economy and what the needs are in those areas. So I think childcare is an area. Housing is a significant area as we look at permitting reform. How do we make sure that we modernize our permits? I think it affects two things. It affects our urban areas and it affects our rural areas because of the competition for land, right? So if we allow and free our urban areas up to appropriately modernize their permits to allow for different ways, that also keeps the urban areas from expanding into the rural areas for housing and land. Becomes really complicated when there's this generational shift going on in our agriculture community now. There's just not as many young people and big families as there were before. So a farmer who's had a farm for a long time has to be able to get something out of that. And if there's no one to give it to, then the competition for land goes up significantly. If we can do permitting reform to allow our urban areas not to necessarily need to expand out into our rural areas as much, I think it'll be significant. So housing and childcare are two particular areas, and it should never take us longer to permit something than it does to build it.
That's often the case. Thank you so much for coming up, and thank the panel.
Well, I want to thank all the witnesses. We have a lot of notes and a lot of work to do. I sit on both committees of jurisdiction. I do want to say to Mr. Salamito that Senator Ernst and I have a great bipartisan bill we've been working on called the Small Business Child Care Investment Act that allows the SBA, if you're a nonprofit, if you're a church, a synagogue, a Boys and Girls Club, a YMCA, any other nonprofit, it allows you suddenly access to SBA resources to put up childcare, because there's childcare deserts all across this country, urban and rural, affordability, availability. We've even had senior centers who say, look, we have the land, we have commercial kitchens, they're nonprofit, we could put up childcare right on our campus, which would be very helpful in some of our rural communities. So we're trying hard to get that passed, and like I said, just removes the guardrails for nonprofits to be able to do that and address this very issue you're talking about. But I want to thank all of you so much for participating in today's hearing, for the hard work you're doing, for the thoughtfulness and care that you're putting behind what you're thinking about, how you're planning for the future, how you're reaching out to our communities, reaching out to our small businesses, whether they're young as 24 years old, people who want to start out, or we don't want to say you're going up in maybe the family farmer who wants to give it to their grandchildren. And so it's really important. We really appreciate examining the rural export businesses, the landscape for that, and your testimony has just been terrific. So the hearing record will remain open for 2 weeks until Tuesday, August 12th, 2024. Any senators who would like to submit questions for the record should do so by Tuesday, August 12th, 2024. And for those of you who testified today, we ask, if you get those questions for the record, that your responses be returned to the committee as quickly as possible, and in no case later than 2 weeks after receipt. That concludes today's hearing. Thank you again.